Welcome to the Rockabye Revenue podcast with me, Abby Watson. I'm a mum of 4 and a business strategist, and I train people to become hypnobirthing teachers. In the last decade, I've built a thriving baby business that grew beyond my wildest dreams. This podcast is for you if you run a business or dream of running a business in the birth and baby industry. You want to change lives whilst making more money. I'm talking about creating sustainable income whilst being present for the people that matter most. I believe for our baby businesses to have the impact we desire, we must be rewarded. On this podcast, expect me to share actionable strategies without the jargon. I've been where you are. I've built a business while raising 4 little ones, and now I'm here to help you turn your passion into profit while creating the life you've always dreamed of. So let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Rockabye Revenue. I hope you are ready to be left feeling so much clearer on how you can make your tasters, your trial sessions, your free masterclasses, whatever you call them, more powerful. Because I tell you what, there's some key things I see people miss time and time again. And do you know what they'll tell me? They'll be like, oh, tasters just don't work for me. Free masterclasses, running trials, they just don't work for me. And it's rarely the case. It's that actually there's some really key ingredients that are missing from them. Now, firstly, let me just say, I have never had this, sorted from the get-go. Like, I think back to some of my taster sessions in my earlier days of running a business, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how did I even get bookings from them? I look back and I'm like, oh my God, like, literally, I just spoke at them double speed to try and fit in as much as I possibly could. And I probably left them feeling like, oh, I've almost like done a hypnobirthing course in this taster. And yeah, it's no wonder my conversions on the back of it were not as good as I'd have liked them to be. And ultimately, it's because I was in a mindset of, as long as I show up and give them so much, they'll be like, oh my gosh, that woman knows so much, I need her in my life. That's what I felt like. I felt like if I show up and give them loads of information, they're going to be like, where do I sign up so I can get more? But the reality was, no doubt I was leaving them feeling like, right, let me just process all this she's already told me. Let me just deal with all these tips that I've already received before I even think about doing a hypnobirthing course. Now, who is this episode of the podcast for? Well, it's for any baby business owners that run trials, tasters, free masterclasses, anything where basically you're offering like a sample of your course. You're going to be giving them value, you're going to be teaching them something, you're going to be letting them experience something, but your aim is for them to, at the end of it, take you up on your paid offer. If you run anything like that, this episode is for you. Or if you are thinking, no, I don't offer that, but actually maybe I should, again, this episode is for you. Now, if we've not met before, my name's Abby Watson. I am a former hypnobirthing teacher, now hypnobirthing teacher trainer, and I have run these kind of like courses, these free sessions for many, many years. And ultimately, these days, these free sessions, form a big part of my enrollments in my business. And I believe in them so much because I know that offering these kind of like sample sessions don't just help you get bookings, they help you get the right bookings. You know, if you've run a session and someone has got to know you throughout that, they've got to sample what you're about, what your courses are about. You know, they've been potentially repelled if they are not the right people for you. That is blooming good for business. That's what we want. You know, we want people to experience what our stuff is about. And if actually at the end of it, they're like, oh, she's not for me, blooming great. Isn't it fab that actually they didn't get to the stage where they were already doing your paid offerings and then think that? So as much as these free sessions or these low-cost sessions are blooming great for attracting clients, they're also quite good for repelling the ones we don't want. You know, if you want to work in your business with clients that are absolutely the right clients, doing these kind of events, these free things, these low-cost things are a great way of doing it, okay? So if I go back to my hypnobirthing teaching days when I was a local business in West Yorkshire teaching one-on-one hypnobirthing, group hypnobirthing, I used to call my sessions taster sessions. I used to call it a hypnobirthing taster, okay? Sometimes I'd call them an introduction to hypnobirthing. It does matter what you call them, but whatever you call them, we're talking about a session where people get to learn something, but then you are aiming to offer them your full offerings. So when I run a taster session, back in the day when I offered these group and one-to-one sessions, my aim was to get a good few bookings at the end of it. So as much as I may be offering an hour of my time for free, and let's face it, it's not just an hour of your time, you're going to be planning it, you're going to be following these people up. I wanted it to be worth my while, as in I wanted to be getting some bookings at the end of it, okay? Now, like I said, when I first started taster sessions, I don't think I had it together at all. And I've got to say, every single taster session is a learning curve, and I really want you to go into it with that attitude too. Like if you do a taster and you are disappointed in how it went or the bookings on the back of it, blooming brilliant. Use that as, you know, your business's biggest lesson. Really think, okay, what went right? What went wrong? What can I do better next time? Because that's the thing about business. Like the things that don't go really well actually are some of the biggest lessons. Okay. So we are here to talk about mainly what you are missing from your tasters, okay? So ultimately, the mistake that I see so many people make when it comes to tasters, trial sessions, freebies, whatever they may be, is that they try and jam-pack them full of info. They do what I did in my early days of business, where I felt like if I leave them with so many light bulb moments, they're just going to be like, I don't know, like gagging for more. And don't get me wrong, there will be a minority of people that love information, they love learning, and they're like, wow, look what I learned in 45 minutes. Imagine if I do her full 10-hour course. Yeah? Of course, there will be a few people like that. But when we think like that, we forget about how distracting and overwhelming the world that we live in right now is. You know, someone can come to your session and have loved it and have really intended and still intend to book your session, but they're not, because they've got distracted. Life's happened. Something else has taken their interest. They forgot, you know? or they didn't have time to speak to their partner, or whatever it may be. So if we simply rely on our sessions being lots of information and great information, we're going to fall short of the bookings at the end of it. So number one thing that you are most likely missing from your tasters is decent follow-up, decent follow-up. Please don't expect people to come to your free session and then have the motivation, the time to contact you the next day. You need to be the active one. You need to be the person following up. Don't expect them to remember. Don't expect them to have the gumption. You follow up with them first. Make sure you are making your course, your services front of mind and staying front of mind with the follow-up. So when you plan a great taster, don't forget to plan great follow-up. And that might be emailing them directly after the session, and then the next day too, and maybe even the next day after that. I know you might hear that and you might think, that's a lot of following up. Am I being annoying? No, you are making things that they need front of mind. And yeah, they still might ignore it. And actually, it might be on day 5 that you send a follow-up and they're like, oh gosh, yeah, I'm meaning to get back to her. But how much more likely are they to do that if you have regularly dropped into their inbox than if you haven't? So one of the things you may be missing from your tasters is decent follow-up. And by that, I don't mean, hello, are you going to book? Show up usefully. Yeah? So you might say, oh, do you remember in the taster we were talking about positive mindset? This is my favourite way of creating a positive mindset. Giving them a little tip in that message, and again, reminding them of where they can book. Okay, so decent follow-up. Now, my next thing that you are probably missing from your tasters is an attitude of less is more. Now, if you are someone who listens to this podcast regularly, or you are in our wonderful Love Your Birth community, perhaps you've heard me banging on about less is more regularly. And I mean, it's because I can't say it enough. So many of us are guilty of trying to overfill sessions. And I know this is true for tasters. Now, why do we want to strip it back and not have too much in it? Well, there's a few reasons. Firstly, we want people to have time to really connect with what you are saying. And if actually you are jumping to the next thing all the time, they're not getting like a real experience of your, without this sounding woo, but your energy, your vibe, who you are, because you're so focused on getting through, giving them tons of information, you're almost like avoiding that opportunity for them to connect with you. You're scrimping past your story about why you're so passionate about what you're doing, because actually you're like, oh my gosh, I need to give them this tip, I need to give them that tip. So if we strip the content back and actually give them, bite-sized mini aha moments instead of huge downloads, actually we are giving them opportunity to really experience what you're about, who you are, and why this thing is so useful to them. So in terms of those mini aha moments, what would be best to focus on are the things that help them see why your services matter, why they matter. Okay, not what they particularly are, not how you make the changes, but why they matter. So as a hypnobirthing teacher, this might be focusing on why hypnobirthing works, and I know there's like 184 reasons why hypnobirthing works, from the hormones to the mindset to all the other things, but we want to focus on one or two of those things. So when I was doing hypnobirthing tasters, I'd be focusing on, for example, why tension impacts birth. See what I'm saying here? Why tension impacts birth. So that they can see the logic, the science behind it. I wouldn't necessarily be then saying, and here's how you move out of tension. Here's all these different strategies for moving out of tension. So I wouldn't be saying, here's a breathing technique. Here's how you shift your mindset. Here's some birth affirmations. No, because that's what they're getting with their full course. But I'm giving this real clear download of, oh, right, yeah. So actually, if I go into labour feeling petrified, I'm going to be tense, and this is what it's going to do. And actually, if I do a hypnobirthing course, it's going to give me so many strategies of avoiding that. Now, I'm not saying you don't give them any of the how, any of the strategies, but if you give them 10 different ways, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, they're just going to be like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. Let me process this. Let me research it. Let me try and incorporate some into my life. Are they going to book your course? No, because they're so busy doing all that. So we want to focus on key, mini, but like incredible downloads rather than 100 aha moments, 100 light bulb moments. Yeah? You see what I mean? The less is more is not about not giving them anything great. It's more about not trying to squeeze in everything you love about your courses into 45 minutes or an hour. Yeah? Now, by stripping it back as well, you're also creating opportunities for you to create relationships. If you focus on getting so much into your sessions, are you going to have time to welcome them all? Are you going to have time to have those little conversations, or, actually feel like you get to know why they are there? And actually, it's that connection that is going to be so, so beneficial. So when planning your tasters, your free masterclasses, or whatever it may be, do think about connection. Don't think of it as like, okay, I'm getting in front of them and I'm doing a speech. You don't want to be doing that. That's blooming nerve-wracking, isn't it? But if you can think, okay, I've got this hour where I'm getting to know them and I'm giving them a few light bulb moments. Brilliant, So how can you get to know them a little bit? What can you do that allows them to share a little bit? So it may even be, if we take an example of hypnobirthing, it may even be thinking, I am going to allow 5 minutes for, me to ask how they love to feel in their pregnancy. And they write it on a post-it note and you read a few out. It could be as simple as that. Okay, it could be that actually you do one of the first tasks that you actually do on your full course that acts as an incredible light bulb. Sorry, not an incredible light bulb moment, an incredible icebreaker, but actually can lead on to the other stuff. Okay. Another thing that you might be missing from your tasters are stories. Stories are so powerful. When we hear a story, we connect with it so much more than just facts alone. Because if I hear you telling a story, about your own pregnancy, I'm gonna hear that and I'm gonna connect with anything that's even remotely similar to mine. That's what we do as humans. We find similarities. So by telling stories, whether it's stories about how you got into doing the thing that you do, or something in your life that really made you think more clearly about one of the aspects of what you offer. So let me explain from maybe a baby class perspective. So if you're a baby massage teacher, for example, telling a story about the first time you ever went to a baby class and how you felt will help them connect with you and help them relate to you, and really pricks up their ears. Okay, so incorporating stories really helps people connect with you, and it's through those stories that you can make powerful points. Okay, so for example, when I ran hypnobirthing tasters for expectant parents, I would tell my story about how I felt before I found hypnobirthing. I'd tell my story about how blooming petrified and clueless I was about birth. I'd tell the story of how I was burying my head in the sand and I was avoiding looking at anything like factual about birth, but actually how I was listening to all the scare stories because I had this view of, I'd rather hear it than not, and actually how that was making me feel worse. And then I'd go into why that is not good in pregnancy. Why actually avoiding the factual stuff and absorbing the scare stories can actually impact the birth process. So rather than just giving them that as a fact, I'm using the stories to connect with them, relate to them, because no doubt there's bits of my experience that perhaps they've experienced, but then I'm giving them this golden nugget of, actually, that's not a great approach. Actually, I discovered that was making me feel more scared. It was actually being detrimental to my mindset, to how I was approaching birth, and I'm doing it in much more of an entertaining way by telling a story. So have you got stories in your tasters? If you haven't, I really, really urge you to think about incorporating storytelling into it. Stories are said to be 20 plus times more memorable than facts alone. So people are so much more likely to remember your story than just showing them a visual aid and how something works. So if you're thinking, I haven't got time for a story, this is where you need to let go of other stuff, because you want the memorable stuff in there, don't you? You want the thing that's going to be the thing that they're thinking about when they go home that night, because that's how they're going to be so much more likely to actually follow up and book your thing. If they feel like what they've learned is memorable, they've connected with you, they get it. And stories can absolutely do that. Now, if you are listening to this episode and you're thinking, but I haven't got a story that kind of relates to my clients and what I offer. So, for example, perhaps you're a sleep consultant and you're actually, I've never used a sleep consultant myself. Maybe, you've never experienced some of the challenges that your potential clients have experienced. That's okay. So if this is you and you're but I've never needed a service like mine, that's fine. That doesn't exclude you from telling great stories. What you might do is tell somebody else's story. Even better if it's a story of a client, So you might use this as an opportunity to say, one of my clients came to me and she told me XYZ. She was feeling like this. She was Googling that. She was up all night worrying about XYZ. And actually, through the course, we was able to overcome this, that, the other, and this is what happens, you know? So by telling that story, you know, again, it's so much more entertaining than just facts alone, but they've been through somebody else's journey that might relate to their own journey. So they're connecting and they're seeing in like, you know, real time, like what actually your service could do for them. And I tell you what, telling stories of your clients does, it also acts as social proof. So many people miss social proof out of their tasters, out of their free masterclasses, out of their trial sessions. And I know that might make you think, okay, well, firstly, what are you on about, Abby, by talking about social proof? But secondly, well, isn't that a bit spammy, sharing, you know, tons of testimonials? Well, no, if you do it in the right way. So, by social proof, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about proof that what you offer works for people, you know? Proof that it's worked for other human beings. So ultimately, yeah, I'm talking about testimonials. But that doesn't have to be that you get a slide on your screen and you're like, this is what Sarah thought of my sessions. No, you can weave this in so much more informally and naturally. Yeah, you could show a slide and say, look how much Sarah loved my sessions. This is what her birth partner, Timmy, said. You know, you could do it like that, or you could just weave these things in so much more informally. So, for example, you could say, you know, my best friend first introduced me to hypnobirthing. Do you know, she was that person that I never thought I'd have a baby because she was terrified of having a baby even before, you know, we were in that time of life of trying for babies. So when she told me she was pregnant, inside I was thinking, how on earth are you going to do it? Well, guess what? She found hypnobirthing and I could not believe the difference it made to her. Suddenly she seemed excited about birth. Suddenly she was like planning a birth in a birth centre when actually I thought she was going to be someone who'd want all the drugs, you know, want an epidural as soon as she felt a first twinge. I couldn't believe this change. And that's when I was like, how have you changed so much? And she told me about hypnobirthing. So can you see what I've done there? You know, I've used something that was so informal, doesn't even have to be a client's experience, but I've weaved it in a way that's storytelling and is sharing with the potential listener that this thing works. We're not lying, we're using all the evidence around us that we already know and we're weaving it into these sessions. Okay, does that make sense? Please, please, please incorporate social proof. And like I said, it doesn't mean that it needs to be a list of testimonials. It can be these lovely stories that you have heard from maybe your clients, or maybe if you're a newer business owner, it's from the people around you. You could even share, for the social proof aspect, you know, celebrity stories. You know, so going back to being a hypnobirthing teacher, because that's my thing that I know and understand, but this can be so relevant to other businesses. Like, as a hypnobirthing teacher, there's so many examples of celebrities, famous people that have used hypnobirthing and have said how fantastic it was for them. We're not saying we pretend it's our client. Definitely not. But we say, did you hear what, you know, Princess Kate said about hypnobirthing? You know, we use that as our social proof before we've even got our own social proof from our clients. Okay. And again, This helps the people at your taster, at your masterclass, at your trial, whatever it is, feel confident that actually other people have gone through this process and they've loved it. It helps them feel like, okay, I'm not going to be the first person in the world to experience this myself. Actually, there's tons of other people and they've had great experiences. So make sure you are incorporating social proof into your sessions. So important. Now, finally, one thing that you might be missing from your taster is an easy way for them to take the plunge. You might think, I'm already making it easy. I'm saying at the end, to book, you go onto my website and you press this button. You might be like, that's super easy. Who can get that wrong? The easier we make it, the more likely someone is to take the plunge. Now remember earlier when I was talking about this distracting era we are in, when we are, so bombarded with everything wherever we go. Because of that, we do need things to be made super simple. So here are a few ways that you can make people taking the plunge really, really easy. You could have at your sessions a QR code. So simple to make, okay? Platforms like Canva can even make these for you, okay? What does a QR code do? Well, it means that someone with their phone can scan the QR code and it can take them directly to where they sign up. They don't need to put in Google the website and all this. You're making it so easy for them. Again, this also could be making it easy with the follow-up. Yes, you've told them in the session where to go to sign up, but actually, if immediately after the session, landing in their inbox or even via text message, the link is being sent to them, even easier, okay? Now, do not send just a general address to your website. Make it easier than that. Send it specifically to the area they book. Or maybe you don't have that. Maybe you don't have a website. Maybe most of your bookings are taken by, you saying, okay, I have this availability. This is when I could do. So instead, if that's how you do it, and of course there's technology that you can streamline that process like Calendly where people can see your availability and click on it. But even if you don't want to do that, you could send them the options, but make it as less as possible. I know it can be tempting to say, here are 20 dates I can possibly do, but if you make those dates smaller, again, it takes the procrastination out of it. If you could offer them 4 potential dates, they only need to think about those 4 dates and choose one. Again, making it easy, okay? So I really, really hope this has been useful to you today. Tasters, trials, free masterclasses, whatever you call them, whatever format you do them in, are a fantastic way of getting people to try before they buy. And they're a fantastic way of increasing your bookings in your business. But if you are missing these key things, actually you might not be getting as much out of them as you potentially could be. So I really hope this episode has been useful. Now I want to end with one thing that I know can always enhance your sessions. Before you do your session, sit down, have 5 minutes with a cuppa and think, how do I want people to leave this session feeling? How do I want the people attending to feel when they leave? Because that's the key. like I said, people buy from your vibe, from your energy, from the feeling they've been left with. And if we decide beforehand intentionally, if I can say that correctly, what you want that to be, you're so much more likely to create that. And you're going to go in to that session instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, I want to get through X, Y, Z, with the bigger picture, with the bigger picture, with that connection, with that feeling you want them to leave with. And actually, guess what? You're going to enjoy the session so much more because the pressure is not on to get through everything that you possibly can, and actually more about the overall vibe, the overall feeling that you want people to get. So, if you have been multitasking whilst listening to this episode, maybe you've been on a drive somewhere, maybe you've been picking the kids up, or maybe you've been walking the dog, whatever, I just want to sum up some of the key things we've been talking about today. So, number one, firstly, do not overfill your sessions. You want them to have simple but effective downloads rather than 100 light bulb moments. Yeah? You want to incorporate stories because that's how people are going to connect with you. You want to share social proof, i.e. ways that other people have experienced your thing and how brilliant it has been for them. Okay. You want to build in connection, whether it's in the session or through the follow-up or even the warm-up too. Okay. And you want to really focus on what you want people to leave feeling, okay? Rather than what you want them to feel like they know, you want them to leave with a feeling that's been intentional, okay? And finally, let's make these people's lives so much easier by making it clear how they can book, making it quick, and make them be reminded of it regularly, so that even in this very distracting world, you and your wonderful life-changing services are front of mind. As always, I would love to know what you have taken away from this episode. So please do come over to my Instagram at loveyourbirth_training and share with me your key takeaway or what you are going to be taking forward from this episode. Now, have a fabulous week, and as always, keep on changing lives. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye. Thank you for listening to Rockabye Revenue. I hope this episode has left you with some fresh ideas and bundles of motivation. If you enjoyed this episode, do make sure you click subscribe so you never miss an installment. And if you found this episode useful, I'd love you forever if you leave a 5-star review, helping this podcast reach the ears of more of the helpers in this world. And remember, keep changing lives. See you next time.